All right.
At least the button came up.
Here we go. All right. So hello, everyone. I am joined here today by two friends and two wonderful people that I am privileged to know from BookTube. They are the Brothers Gwynne. Hello, Ed and Will. How are you guys today?
This time not Ed and Ed, but Ed and Will. Very well, Philip. Thank you for having us here. We're really excited to chat today.
Yeah, we are. So yeah, I'm Will, as Ed said. And yeah, we're really looking forward to talking about your work, Philip. It was a privilege of ours to have a chance to read it, and we're just looking forward to sharing our thoughts with you.
Well, I have to say the honor is mine. I deliberately wanted you two to read the book, and I asked you because I had an inkling that you guys would understand a lot of what I was trying to do, readily understand because of your particular tastes and your particular experience and your reading background. So I know that you guys have read extensively in all kinds of genres, but I also know that you read a fair amount of Norse material and Old English poems and historical fiction and whatnot. So I was very keen to see your particular reactions to my book, where all those influences are pretty important. So, I guess what we're going to do here today is I'm going to just get your non-spoiler reactions first. And this part will release in the near future. And after that, the two of you are going to tell me your sort of much more spoilery reactions. We'll talk about specific scenes and stuff like that. And I will save that video for a future time, hopefully for when after the book is published. But for today, let's do the non-spoiler reactions. If you guys have any questions for me, I want to hear all your observations. I'm actually very excited. And once again, thank you so much for just taking the time to do this. It means so much to me that two incredibly perceptive and informed readers like you guys would have the generosity to do this for me. It just means so much to me. So thank you guys.
There's no need to thank us at all.
It was a pleasure, Philip. Thanks so much for sending it through. And you are correct that, we have this taste that is, mainly inspired by Dad and, our love of fantasy very as children, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That, I think you've definitely captured in your book, and we'll definitely save the spoiler video for when you have your 9-figure deal, I'm sure.
Well, any deal sounds good to me. To be honest, but
yeah, you've been working on this for a long time. I think you said 18 years in that video with Jimmy Nuts, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I think this summer it will be 18 years. Yeah, wow. I started in the summer of 2004. So, and it seems so like long ago, and yet I vividly remember sitting down and drawing the map. That was the first thing I did. I drew a map with place names that I deliberately used inspirations from some of the places I've been, the languages that I'm familiar with, including Welsh. So there's a portion of that world where there's very Celtic sounding names. There's a portion of that world with very obviously Old English roots and Old Norse roots. And then there's a portion that's kind of has a more, my time in South Asia, Nepal and so forth, where that's kind of an influence there, along with a kind of a Roman kind of vibe or something like that, maybe. But I drew a map, and then because I wanted to see the world, I wanted to see it, and then think about what story could possibly take place in this world. So, yeah.
That's awesome. You start with a map. I know Dad says that when he draws a map, he loves doing that. He leaves it so that he can then alter it going with the story, but he loves kind of drawing it out. He's an artist as well, isn't he? So it really just brings it to life for him. And so did it kind of do the same thing for you then, that you just thought, what can happen here? And
exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I used to draw a lot myself too, so I actually enjoy doing that sort of thing. I just sort of let my fingers wiggle around there and make the coastlines. And where would a mountain range go, and plop, and so you feel kind of like you're overlooking this huge landscape, and you're almost like, playing God or creator or something. Let's put a river here. So
it's so important because you're going to spend so much time actually in this new world that you've created. Was there ever a point when you were writing after you'd drawn the map that you thought, actually the landscape doesn't reflect what I need in the story, so I need to maybe get my rubber out?
I did. I actually did. There were parts of the story where I realized, okay, wait, it takes, so you look up all this stuff, as you guys probably know when you're writing, like how far can you ride a horse in a day, right?
Yeah.
Or how long does it take an army to march from point A to point B? You know, how far can they go? And you look up stuff like that, and then you realize, oh, I have to change my map. Or how far can a ship sail in so many hours? And then you realize, oh, I'm gonna have to move that island a little bit here, you know, in order for this to make sense. So absolutely, yes, that map did evolve as the story went on. And and even some names changed. I think I started out with like maybe 20 different kingdoms, and my agent said to me, that's too many. Your readers are gonna be confused. You need to, you know, whittle that down. So I think I ended up with 10. So there
compromise.
Yeah, it's probably still too many, honestly, but you don't get introduced to all of them in the first book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's a good amount because it shows that you've spent a lot of time and energy into researching. I know that in your video with Jimmy Nuts, you said that you wrote like a nice history of the world.
I did.
To kind of help you out, I guess, and just kind of paint it in even more vivid picture in your mind. And what's nice is in your first book, which we're so lucky to have read, is that you show us a few of these different cultures, and then it's kind of teasing other ones, which is really exciting. So it kind of leaves the reader just wanting, like in the next book, to maybe we might meet these people, like that kind of thing, which is exciting, you know. Definitely.
Yeah, one of the main things I was going to say is one of the many strengths is the world building, and I thought we get a lot, but there's obviously so much more to come. But it just hits that balance where I want more, but there's still enough to keep me really entertained in what there is in this book.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I'm definitely going for there. And I can promise there will be more cultures in book 2, and even more exploration in book 3. So yeah, it's that was definitely something I had in mind. And it's fun as a writer too, to, hey, I want to explore this world, you know, and what are these people like? And you don't always know the answers to that until you go there in the story. So
it's a new challenge, isn't it? I think we mentioned in a video recently, my spoiler-free thoughts are kind of, I like to think of this author meets this author, and I like to do that a lot with lots of books that I love. And this one made me feel like, imagine if Tolkien had written his landscape and his world, and then David Gemmell characters had invaded this world and they were living. And I mean, those are two of my favorite authors ever. So I mean, you know, that's just a testament to how much I enjoyed your book, Philip, because you paint this beautiful landscape that is so obviously influenced by, like you said, the places you've been and the cultures that you've been surrounded with, and your knowledge of Anglo-Saxon life and Old Norse life. And it was just so nice to read. And it felt like you're looking out of a window at this, you know, these landscapes that were painted in such detail. It felt like I wanted to be there. It's like when you're first reading the chapters of the Shire, that you actually want to live there, which in a lot of fantasy, you know, I don't want to live in Joe Abercrombie's world because, you know, it doesn't seem that nice. There's no nice fields or anything like that. But your book has such a nice balance, I think, of places that are beautiful and untamed, as well as places that have, you know, are civilized and also exciting with cultures and vibrancy as well. And then David Gemmell has just characters that are so real, and you know, you might feel they're heroic at points, but they don't ever feel heroic to themselves, which is what I think you've definitely captured that sense. And I think you mentioned in your video with Jimmy Nuts, it's kind of more of a modern take on classic fantasy, which I think that is going to just, so many people are going to want to read that now, because people love The Wheel of Time, people love Lord of the Rings, but you know, sometimes it might feel a little bit dated. You might want a more modernist approach that is just unique to you as well, and that's what you've done.
Yeah, I want to touch that. I thought we actually hadn't talked about kind of those influences. Me and Ed, we said to you before the recording started that we often don't talk about something before we talk to the author, like we do with Dad, because then we don't influence each other's thoughts, and it's just interesting to see where we agree and disagree. And I was going to say, I completely got that feel as well, it seems like there's that inspiration from those traditional fantasy elements. To me, what sprung to mind was like Tolkien and Eddings, but then it evolved into what's felt very modern at the same time. I'm not sure if it's something you're going for, but it felt like it became a bit darker, a bit grimmer with the disillusionment of certain characters. And I loved how it kind of, that way we've really seen to the minds of the characters, and it's like, oh, everything's amazing, and then sudden things happen and they start to think, okay, everything's not so shiny. I think that really reflected in how they see the world.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to keep a stupid grin off my face while while you guys are talking, because I really appreciate the way you guys put that, to say that it's reminiscent in some ways of the world building that Tolkien was doing. Is, for me, is like, Tolkien is obviously a huge influence in my life. Probably the reason I even am doing any of this, frankly. I mean, my life path is really, I think, traceable to reading Lord of the Rings as like a 12 or 13-year-old kid. So, but yeah, absolutely. I want beauty to exist in this world. I want it to be something that the readers feel, because it's something I feel as I'm walking in a forest and sort of keeping half an eye out for maybe elves or that sort of thing. After reading after reading Lord of the Rings as a kid, I couldn't help but wish to encounter an elf. Although my elves are actually very different from Tolkien.
Might not want to be encountering those.
Yeah, they're not beautiful and graceful people. My elves are not like that. But I actually go back to some much older sources for my ideas about elves and other things, which Tolkien would have been very familiar with as well. But yes, thank you so much for saying that. And the idea that a sort of a Tolkien-esque kind of landscape inhabited by characters that remind you of a writer like Gemmell is that I actually think I'd love to put that on the dust jacket. If you guys, if I can quote you and stick that on the book, that would be fantastic. However it gets published, because if I don't succeed in the traditional publishing world, then I will definitely self-publish. And I'd love to put a blurb from you guys on there with your permission.
That'd be amazing for us.
I mean, if you surprisingly don't get a deal with a publishing house, then just put it on Kickstarter. You'll blow Brandon Sanderson out the water. That's fine.
Yeah, right. I think he might have a slight edge over me in that realm. But,
he's had a head start. That's why.
Just a little head start there.
Yeah, exactly.
But so that idea is modern fantasy is. I had to read because I talked about this a little bit with Jimmy. I wanted to do what Tolkien did. So what did I do? I went out and learned Old English and Old Norse and read 1,000-year-old poems and stuff. And at some point I realized, I actually have to figure out how modern fantasy works. So I did read. I actually have not yet read Gemmell, but I have read authors inspired by Gemmell for sure. So probably, it's hard to exactly say. Definitely Tolkien is in my DNA, but also Ursula Le Guin was a very important writer for me early on. But I would say in terms of the grittiness, that might be a George R.R. Martin influence, because that The Song of Ice and Fire is a series that I did read before I started writing myself. At least not all the books, but the ones that have been published by 2004 when I started writing. Probably it's hard for me to say exactly, but that more modern take with I think the introduction of uncertainty, but also I think importantly consequences. Because when you have terrible things happen, to me at least, it doesn't feel compelling if that doesn't have an impact on the characters and their development, and that's terribly important to me, that there be a more important than, like, say, a battle scene is what happens to the characters after, the survivors. How does that impact them? So I definitely hope it feels that way.
Yeah, definitely. The focus is the characters, isn't it? And it's like, I think writers, if they want, action scenes should be used to further that character development, whether it's to affect their position or themselves personally. And I think you definitely use action in that way where you really feel that these characters, it is affecting them. I think in a lot of books you can feel that it kind of, if we actually think what war is like, you don't get that gravitas to it, do you, with a lot of characters? But in this, you really do, and that's where it's kind of mixing that traditional fantasy with modern fantasy. It's very interesting. A lot of people you hear, they say they're inspired by Tolkien or George R. R. Martin, don't you? You don't hear too many, I think, that say both. And hearing you say that you're inspired by both and mixing them, I can now you said it, it really kind of clicks into place, kind of seeing those elements in there.
Yeah, and I think you can see that you've read widely, because you've got this lovely base of like the Tolkien aspects and Ursula Le Guin, and then as well as you've got the characters of George R. R. Martin's world, which are, you know, they're very grey people. There are a few that are a bit more naive, and they grow through the book, you know, from their naive self, and they're thrust into situations that make them develop, and you've made them develop, which is like, yay, they actually had an arc, which is really good. So, you know, we love to read that. I think you would absolutely love David Gemmell, Philip, like especially the Regante series. There are just moments in that, especially with Celtic origin, which I know if you liked The Faith and the Fallen, then the Regante would be right up your street.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I'm actually going to start with the Draenei books, I think, soon.
Yeah.
But I will.
A great starting place of that is Legend. I think that's kind of, I think that's the first one he wrote, standalone.
Yep. That'll be where I'll start, I think, and relatively soon. I can promise you this year I'll be reading some Gemmell.
We'll hold you to that.
Definitely, please do. And it's a big gap in my fantasy reading, honestly. And viewers have been encouraging me to read Gemmell ever since I started the channel, really. And some have been very shocked. You haven't read Gemmell? What's wrong with you? You know, so. So I definitely want to, based on everything I've heard, and not least because a lot of my favorite authors, including one you know very well, have been influenced by Gemmell. And by the way, I'm actually very touched by what you said about the book being a mixture of classic and modern, because that's exactly how I feel about your father's writing. You know, I really do feel that his is the first example that ever comes to my mind when someone says, what's a great mix of classical fantasy with a modern spin? I think of your father's books right away, and just a wonderful blending of those elements. So for me to hear you guys say that just makes my soul lift up. So yeah.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I mean, I think Gemmell was kind of required reading in our house if you actually wanted dinner. We actually named a Christmas tree Druss, didn't we? After one of the characters from David Gemmell. So there you go. There, but I think he captures the human psyche so well, and he makes these characters go through terrible things, and you love them so much, and things happen to them, and they make bad decisions. Like, you know, some of your characters definitely make some bad decisions, which is so exciting for the reader to read and endure, but at the same time you're like, no, just go and do this and live peacefully, because we actually grew attached to these characters, and I'm sure when we go into the spoiler talks we will talk much more about which characters we really loved, which characters we love to hate as well, because there are some very good bad people that they don't think they're very bad, but there are moments here that just remind me of Joe Abercrombie, you know, with these internal dialogues. I think you capture so well. And there are a few characters you do that with, and you just cannot help but laugh. I think you've got a great sense of humor, little streak in there as well.
I try to put a little subtle humor here and there, and I love that. Again, I mean, just to be even named in the same sentence with Joe Abercrombie is an incredible honor, obviously. And I could never be as witty and humorous as he is, because I think he's the greatest in the world at that. But I do have some humor in there for sure, and I do have characters that on the baddies, you know, who similar to, again, what I think your father does. I try to introduce these characters, and right away you recognize, oh, it's a bad guy. But then later on, I try to complicate that a little bit in some ways, where maybe you feel like, oh, I see, maybe this is where this person is coming from, and maybe that's a little more complicated or understandable even. and that maybe even, wow, this character kind of has a point, so hopefully that comes through.
It's moves like that really like invested me even more, because like when you actually have to consciously think, okay, wait, it's not just as simple as, okay, good guy, bad guy. There's a lot of blurred lines there, and you're thinking, okay, well, are they right? They know, they have more knowledge about this kind of thing, without getting spoilers. But then obviously, but by the end you got a few more clues. But it's still, again, I think it's one of those where I think most aspects in storytelling, it's about a balance, especially when it's a series. And I think you've hit that balance again of, okay, here's information where to get you hooked, but there's still a lot more to discover. There's a lot of questions I want answering.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you so much. And what you guys mentioned in your April wrap up, something that was kind of important to me, and I didn't really have it. It's very hard to judge your own writing, and I've always sort of wondered about the pacing, and I've always sort of thought, is this going to be boring? Is this too slow? Or am I trying to push things along too much here? And it's just such a hard thing, at least for me, to judge. So yeah, I mean, I was very pleased when you mentioned pacing in your wrap up.
Yeah, it must be hard with you being so close to it. We know, like Dad said, that it's very hard for him as well, because you're kind of thinking, well, this leads to there. But with readers, they might not know where it's leading at that point. So yeah, definitely, we thought the pacing was great. We really, there's a great mix of, I think a lot of authors kind of struggle with the calmer moments. And I think that's where one of your strengths are. Like a lot of authors, they really hone their craft in the really fast-paced scenes. But then they kind of rush
like
through the
epic
rest.
set pieces. But
Yeah,
then I think, definitely, I agree. One of your strengths, Philip, is those moments of downtime to further the character and the plot. You capture really well, which usually, if you read a novel, that will be kind of the low moments, and they won't be, but you've got those moments great. So once you got those, it's plain sailing for the reader, really.
That's important to me, to have those more reflective moments as well, and intersperse them with the peaks and the valleys, hopefully that creates investment. That's the goal. It creates investment in the characters, so that those big action moments are even more impactful than, because you're more attached to these characters through those occasional inner musings, so definitely was a goal.
I think that's the beauty of multi-POV writing as well, that you can have this opportunity to, this person can have a few little chapters of, they're having a bit of downtime, you can be traveling anyway, that kind of thing, and then other characters have these moments that are really full of like political intrigue and dark moments, and then or funny stuff, like you say, or even action and that kind of thing. And it's all about having a balance, and I think you struck a great balance with having characters that you really get behind, and characters that at the start they're kind of feel irredeemable, that kind of thing, but then as they go on, they're a bit more sympathetic, which is great. And I like it when characters start off, rather than starting off sympathetic and then they go to irredeemable, you feel like they start the other way around, which
subverting
is them, which is a great idea. And you've definitely got a really good balance.
I tried, and of course that hopefully continues in book 2 with the characters' arcs, those that are alive at the end of book 1 anyway. That's definitely there, and the more, I guess, likable or good characters, hopefully they seem a little complicated as well. They make some bad decisions, and although it is something to, I guess, have a good character who is obviously good, and then it's something else. I think it's another layer or another level of complication to have your reader. You don't want your reader to get too frustrated with that character, obviously, because you feel like shouting at the book, but also to understand that this person is flawed, though you like this person. This person is flawed. This person is complex, and hopefully that makes the character feel more compelling. But
Well, I think I think a lot of what having a compelling character is, we like to relate to people, don't we? Especially characters that we feel attached to, and so flawed characters is I think incredibly important, and that's what we're kind of talking about with that more modern feel as well, because there's some brilliant characters in traditional fantasy, but that's probably one of the weak links of a lot of series back then. But then nowadays, I think that's one of the strengths. And yeah, you've again talking about that mix and combining those flawed characters. I think you've got across the board, and I think you're writing kind of as soon as we're in someone's mind, you kind of immediately get a realization of who this kind of person is. But then that changes over time as well. So there is that growth which is needed.
Yeah. I'd love to, reflect on how the characters were at the beginning to how they are at the end, and you can really actually, it's like a tangible thing that you can actually see that they have changed. And I think if you go attached to a character early on in the book, that you can kind of get away with a few more moments where they might be a bit frustrating. Like I know, I don't know if you've read the Greatcoats, Philip, but Falkio is a main character who sometimes does your head in, and you're like, no, don't do that. But because you really like him at the beginning, he gets away with a few more moments of that. Whereas if it was a character you didn't really like as much, then you might get a little bit bored with some things that we're doing. But that was never the case for your book at all. There were no moments of being bored or frustrated so much that you were like, just come on, get on with it now,
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Yeah, so thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate this. And I just want to make sure, is there anything else you want to mention in the non-spoiler part of this? Or shall we stop recording?
One more thing I was going to say. So the prose, the style, I think that they can find that as the hardest part, really. But I think that you've got this really smooth. It links into basically everything we've mentioned already, where everything seems very vivid and real. And I think you really utilize your prose to really get that across. We're talking about the world building, and your prose you use masterfully to do that, as well as with dialogue and understanding those characters in that way. And I think it was really smooth read that really just made it easy to kind of just blitz through reading it, and like I could have read it in like 2-3 sittings.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that was another thing I kind of worry about, is because I'm sort of on the record as being a fan of slightly archaic prose. I love the essay written by Ursula Le Guin called From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, where she argues that you need to, the prose is the world. It builds the world through this other language. You're telling your reader, you're in a different place, right? This isn't our world. So I admire writers like Tolkien. Obviously is an older one who some people find his writing too archaic, but there are some more, like we mentioned, George R.R. Martin, who I believe does a really great modern balance of kind of accessible, but he actually writes with archaic prose, and he's good at it. So I was kind of going for more of that, where it was not hard for a person to read today, but it felt like you were being put in a different world by that prose. Yeah,
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if this is what you're going for, but it feels like you actually alter your prose slightly depending on the perspective you're with.
Yes.
To reflect the characterization, and that's something that I think Joe Abercrombie is an example who does that really well.
Yeah.
I think most authors kind of leave it the same, and I think, again, I've said it so many times, but that's what makes the world feel so real, because whoever you're with views the world differently, and they're in a different setting as well. And I think, again, the prose being altered is a small thing that you might not notice at first, but then as a whole, it really makes a huge difference.
I think looking back, from the very first page, I realised how much effort and time and energy you'd put into it, because it felt so polished, and it felt like you had worked on this for a long time, and it is just like every word you've used is the word that you chose to use for a reason, which is, when you feel like you're reading that, it feels like a bit like Robin Hobb sometimes, where you can see that her word choice is for a very specific reason, which is reflected at the end. And to me, the prose is kind of another layer of immersion, and I'm a proper geek about like cultures and what they wear, what people eat, and the worlds that they're actually in. So I'm a proper nerd about all that. And I think the prose just reflected that, and that added to the immersion for me. So so good job, Philip. That's what I would say. I mean, to readers, I would say it feels like this has to just be published straight away. You might have much to do. I think my notes in the spoiler chat later will be, to add even more things that a reader would want to see, as in terms of making the cultures even just more exciting to read, that kind of thing, when you lift the reader wanting more. So that's always a very good thing to have, I think.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I probably revised the book more times than any sane person should. But, but I'm so glad to hear you guys react with these things, because Will, what you said is just, I was really trying to do, and maybe not in as obvious a way as like Abercrombie does. He does it so well, where the narrative voice, or let's say the POV character's voice, bleeds into the narrative voice, and you sort of reinforce the character that way. I'm sure it's not as obvious as it is with Abercrombie, but I did try to do that. So yeah, I mean, very
and
cool.
I think it's got a strength in another way, is that I think, again, I'm not sure if there's something you went for, but that subtlety across all the different aspects of storytelling, whereas Joe Abercrombie, it worked, but he's very in your face.
Yeah.
But and taking another, you've taken another option with that, it seems, and that subtlety, I think made it had a really different impact, but similar achievement, I think.
Yeah, I think Abercrombie creates like a stark black and white kind of landscape with his writing, where like the Northmen are so culturally different to, you know, everyone else, that that's why he's done it. But I think yours, Philip, it feels like they're all in the same region, the same world, a little bit like, you know, the people of Gondor and Rohan kind of mixing, that kind of thing. Whereas there's subtle differences between the way that they are. And that the more you read, the more you see it, and like the way they describe certain things. And yeah, so there you go.
Well, thank you guys. I really, again, I can't express enough how grateful I am to have just wonderful people like you at all. I mean, just aside from the fact that I am hoping the books will be published, I feel so grateful that that you guys have read the story of the first book, and it makes me feel very, very happy. So I thank you for giving me that happiness, and to hear your feedback like this is just it's extremely fulfilling for me. So thank you so much.
Well, we love to read, Philip, and to read something that is just dripping with things that we already loved, you know, the history and the lore and the origins of fantasy and Anglo-Saxon inspiration and Old Norse and Welsh culture as well. It was so exciting to read, and as a friend of ours, it was just even more exciting. And I think Mark Lawrence, that he was relieved when he started reading it and he found out it was actually pretty good. So you know, it's one of those things where, you know, someone asks you to read their book and you're like, I'm willing this to be great, and luckily it is great.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
All right,
thank you for that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, and we will stop recording now, but we'll take a little break, and we'll record a spoiler-filled discussion, which I will release at some future time, probably, I'm guessing, whenever the book is published. So that it could be a while, but
it'd be great to watch back then.
Yeah, it'll be fun, actually. It'll be a lot of fun. So, all right, gentlemen, for now, though, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching this. And if for some reason you are not yet subscribed to the Brothers Gwynne, I cannot emphasize enough what a wonderful, positive place it is. They are so well read, as I said, in fantasy, but also I have said publicly, these two are my go-to channel for historical fiction. Absolutely. I don't know anyone who's read as much, maybe just your dad, I don't know, but has anyone read as much historical fiction as the Gwynne brothers, or does anyone do as much to promote it? So I don't think so. So brilliant channel, everybody, go check it out. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, again.
Truth and courage.
All right, truth and courage.